Okay, I've just started cleaning the hidden tang just a little bit. Went back to a 220, and we're just getting the heat treat scale off. And I'm just gonna do both knives while I have one belt on the grinder, and then we'll step up a grit. And we're just going to keep going. Not much to see, and basically it's just going to go from this to really nicely polished. And I really don't do anything to the edges of the knife until I get the handle material on there. And that way we can work the handles and everything down as a unit. And we're going to be soldering these guards on just as soon as we get the knives polished up. So we'll come back when we have these things cleaned up and presentable. Alright, got them up to put them on the 1200 grit belt, and then I just went over to an emery wheel, and I just do a preliminary polish. And what that lets me do, of course you can't see anything because I'm pinned in too tight. There we go. But I take it just to an emery polish. It has some grease on it from the buffing compound. But what the preliminary polish lets me do is find those little scratches that don't show up until you get to this stage. But they're turning out pretty nice. The grind stayed nice, and this 01 takes a real nice polish. So I'm going to call it a night, and tomorrow we'll be soldering the guards on. And the first thing I'll do when I get home is dress them down to give them a little bit of taper before I actually attach them. And then we are, we're real close on these. Through the work week, I just kind of hit these in the evenings if I feel like it. I didn't do much to them last night at all. So what you see from heat treatment is basically what I've done just in this one evening. One of the pitfalls, those aren't electrical shocks from the motor or the wall or anything else. That's static electricity. And the only way I can avoid it is when I grind. If I keep a hand against my tool rest and ground it, but then I feel like that limits my motion, yeah, we do grind our skin away. That's going to sting. You don't feel those when they happen because this is a 1200 grit belt. And anyway, I wanted to show you those sparks. There's no good way to avoid it. It's just part of it. But these belts, and the finer the grits, and this is a cloth back belt, so it doesn't dig any holes. But that's just a 1200 grit polish with streaks of my humanity on it. But and we're just we're going to do this. We've got a 2000 constructed the same way, and we'll take these up to that before we get over there on the emery wheel. If I had an apprentice in this shop, this would be his job, or hers. I suppose I could connect some sort of grounding strap somewhere, But the thing about it is, I'm separated from the electric motor of this grinder, and the only thing connecting me to it is a drive belt, you know, and it doesn't conduct. And I want it that way because I do use water on this. So yeah, it's just don't want to tempt fate. So I could take these little electric shocks. The bench is wood, so I can't ground to it. The only thing metal close to me that I could ground to would be the chassis of the motor. I'm just not going to do that. I don't want any metal connection between me and that electric motor. So, you know, blood, sweat, tears, and electrical shock. It all goes into our knives, doesn't it? Well, we cleaned everything up with lacquer thinner and have taken everything up just to an emery buff. And before I get the guards soldered on, I like to take them up to that point, and that's going to show me any scratches that I would rather try to get out before I had the guards in the way. And I don't see any. Now, after we get the guards soldered on and before we put the handles on, both of these knives are going to spend a lot of time over there in that rotary vise getting wet dry sanded by hand. I don't know how well you can see that. But that is just a rough polish in this shop. So anyway, we're going to start soldering. I'm going to clean my hands real well, and I'm going to give these a final wipe down before soldering with a little swipe of acetone. Get all the grease off this, and I'm going to just make a very thin little Sharpie line where this juncture is, and then I'm going to go below that where the metal to metal is. And I'm going to take probably some 300 grit and just scuff it just a little bit, just to give the solder something to get its fingers around. Alright, I thought I had gotten footage of soldering the first one, and when I looked up, the display had gone dark. I don't know what happened because it shows a full charge on the battery. I'm just getting a little more flux on there. Now this whole area I clean off really well because everybody knows flux is pretty corrosive. Both mating surfaces have been scuffed, so we got good. So we'll get good adherence, and then clamped it lightly, and then pulled the pins. I don't want a silver ring of solder around the pins. I don't want the pins to necessarily be glaring at you when we're all finished. So now we're just going to bring this up to temperature slowly. And this is a low melt solder. You see how much I have out. It doesn't take much. I go ahead and melt some solder on top of the whole thing. Then I take my acid brush and I start pushing the solder around, and it goes right into the joint and gets to where the flux is. And along the way we end up tinning the top and sides of our guard, but that comes off very easy. It's a very thin layer of solder. So I just want to keep my heat on there just enough now to keep it molten. And it's flowing everywhere. And remember, the solder's job is just to seal the joint between the steel and the guard. And that's all it's really intended to do. It does have some holding power, but that's not what I want. So I let it solidify just a little bit, freeze up. And I just get in here with a brass wire brush and I just start scrubbing the excess off. Because the more you get out right now, the less you have to try cleaning out later. But generally you'll end up with a layer of solder all over everything. Alright, so we're pretty much froze off here, so I'm going to get this over to the air hose and blow it off there, and then we're going to go on to the next step, which is shaping these guards down and getting set for our finish. Alright, went ahead and trimmed the pins off. You just want a little bit sticking up above the surface of your guard, and what I've also done is I've just ground the heads of the pins to just a slight conical shape, with the center being the highest point, and the reason for that is I want to when I peen these on, basically what I'm making is a rivet. But as I strike the head of the pin, I want to drive the center in and kind of make the pin expand, and that's exactly what it does. It expands within the hole, and we just keep doing it. You don't hit brass too very hard, and you can use your peening side of your hammer if you want to. And if you didn't grind that head on there, you probably want to do that. But with that conical head, I have found you just start gently striking. Now, if this were stainless steel on these pins, I'd be hitting a little bit harder right now. But you just want to get the depth of your pin is pretty important. You don't want these to be flush as you're striking. You want some head there to work when you flip this thing over. And you start working the other side, and all we're looking for is the ripple. Because if you hold this on a firm surface, like a little bench anvil like this, you're essentially hammering both sides at the same time. Alright, we're done. Now when we grind that excess away, basically what we're going to see is just smooth brass. I'm sorry I didn't even have it in the camera, but yeah, that is that's about what we're looking for. They've swelled out, they've really cinched in tight, and now we can go ahead and get all this excess ground off, get them looking like brass again, get all this cleaned off. That's pretty important because we have flux on here, and that's going to be corrosive, so we want to get that off pretty quick, and we will. So anyway, that's what they look like right after they're soldered. Again, they don't look like much, but the solder did what we wanted it to do, and this is an important step. If not, then and the solder goes all the way around. It is completely sealing the juncture between the brass and the steel, and the reason for that is so corrosives, oils off your skin, just anything at all can't get into there between and start rusting where you can't do anything about it anyway. So it's an important step. We're going to go ahead and get the other one peened in, and then we'll come back when these look like something. Okay, we just lightly ground these down just over there on the little 2x42, and yeah, the pins just kind of disappear. Not that that's really what we're shooting for. It's just a byproduct of using brass pins with brass guards. But now we can get over there, and I'm going to buff all of this solder residue off of there, and so I don't have to worry about corrosion. And I'm about ready to call it a night, but I'm glad to have this stage done. Every little step gets us closer to completion. So we'll come back tomorrow after work and continue on this. I'm just going to clean these up and hit the hay, guys. Alright, here it is early on a Saturday morning, and I do mean early. It's 5 o'clock. So got it checked up here in the rotary vise. This is the full tank version, and I don't try to do everything, as I said, over on the belt grinder. A lot of times it just takes handwork. So what I do, this is some wet and dry. This is 320. But I'm working this area right in here. I want to get this kind of done first and get away from that, and then I can get into this flat. But I just using a piece of key stock as a sanding block, and I'm just going very gently. And what I did see was some scratches are coming this way on the blade, so I'm going at an angle to them. And the water just keeps the grit kind of in suspension, and you get a good cut this way. Now, as I'm doing this, I am using this to check my work, because at knife shows that I have attended in the past, not as an exhibitor, but just as an attendee, I have seen some buyers pull out one of these or a magnifying glass and really check somebody's work out. And you know, some of the knife buying public can be, you know, really discriminating. And if you're getting ready to plunk down some good hard cash for somebody's work, I guess you do want to make sure it's right. So I figure I'll get ahead of the game and I will critique my own work. And I am my own worst critic, truthfully. But I'll give my knives probably more scrutiny than a potential buyer will. And they've got to satisfy me before I'll ever show them in public. So I'm just looking for the lines that used to go at another angle, the straight angle. I'm doing about a 45 degree to the scratches that I did see. And going this way, it really helps the ones that you saw originally show up. And quite honestly, I think I'm there. And I'll just put my little loop part on here. Yeah, I think I got those. So I'm ready to begin this flat, and I'll go to a wider backer. I got everything from this piece of wood with a little radius on it to get right in there to a piece of aluminum ground the very same way. And we're just going to get these flats trued up. And don't have any bad scratches down here in the flats, but I did have some right in here on this area. And I've gotten those out, so they no longer bothered me. But they did until they disappeared. And they weren't deep, but they were deep enough to where on mirror polish they would just kind of be like a sore thumb. Again, at least to me. You just keep going. You've put this much work into the knife to this point. You want it to be right from here on out. And getting things like those little scratches out, that's part of it. So before I move into this part, I'm going to roll her over and make sure we don't have similar scratches on this part. I've just about gotten all the, I'm going to call them perpendicular scratches for lack of a better word. I think I just about got them out of there, and all I had now are like shadows that go this way. So you're really close at that point. And really one of the main reasons to get these out of here is if this knife blade ever snapped, I would bet you a dime to a donut that the break started in one of these little scratches. Remember what I said about stress risers? If I did mention them in this video on this series, but that's exactly what that would be. And any use on this knife would tend to flex the blade, in this direction. And if a break occurs, that's going to give it a toe hold. That's another reason you want to get these out of here. And I think I've gotten there. I'm going to dry the blade off, and I just took a little bit of a break, and I watched a video by Harry Faber. And he talked about having some toast for breakfast. And I'll tell you what, I haven't eaten yet, and I have wanted toast since he mentioned that. So I have to stop now, and I'm going to go make myself some toast. Dang. Thank you, Harry. Alright, we got that monkey off our back. I'm just going to work the edge a little bit here, and then we're going to be done with this. I'll move to the other knife, which just looked over the other knife. It is not anywhere near as bad as this one was. Alright, showing all of this would make for a very dull video, so next time you see us, we're going to be putting the handles on this thing. Interrupt this knife making video for a short unboxing. This just arrived. Got a nice, this is a handwritten little thank you note. Hello, Dale. Thank you for your order. Aubrey and Jeremy from Arbor Tees up in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And let's see, this is, oh, okay. This shows you how to compost the packaging. Alright. And in this box, is 9 ounces of organic Darjeeling Macaberry Estate First Flush Black Tea. And I actually got this for Kim, because Kim is the tea drinker in the family. I'm a coffee guy, although I do drink tea occasionally. I'm probably going to have to give this a try, but I'm not going to open it. I'm going to let Kim do that. But this tea came highly recommended. And I'm going to have to give Harry Faber the credit or the blame for this. But yeah, just on a whim, on an inspiration, I went ahead online after watching his video and reading his comment in response to mine, and that is what has resulted in my holding this bag of fine tea. But we're going to give it a shot. So Harry, your influence is felt across the ocean. Now, we'll take this back into the house so it doesn't get filthy. I even washed my hands, believe it or not, to unbox that. And we've got this knife to a pretty decent polish now. And the Hidden Tang version is over there in the rotary vise now getting done. But I did want to stop once the postman brought this and do a little unboxing. So we're back at it. Okay then. Let's see here. And we'll try it this way. That's really good. My Red International cup is kind of reserved for coffee. And I don't really own a real teacup. This is as close as I could get. But this is really good. Thank you, Harry.